There is a particular silence that only exists in the moments after a world ends. It is not a peaceful quiet. It is a vacuum, a sound so profound it swallows the echo of the words that created it. It is heavy, thick, and cold. And in that silence, you can feel the collective heartbeat of a room skip, stutter, and freeze. I know this silence. I was married in it. It was supposed to be the most beautiful sound in the world. The first notes of the processional swelling from the string quartet, the rustle of 100 guests rising to their feet, turning to see me. My father's arm was tight under mine, a steady, familiar anchor. My breath was a misty cloud in the cool, evening air of the garden, the fairy lights in the trees twinkling like 1,000 captured fireflies. I looked down the petal-strewn aisle and saw him. My Liam. His eyes were already glistening, a wide, incredulous smile spreading across his face that seemed to say, "I can't believe you're real. I can't believe you're mine." I took my first step. My dress, a cascade of ivory silk and French lace, whispered against the grass. I was halfway to my future, suspended in a perfect, crystalline moment of joy. And then a sound. Not music. Not a happy sigh. A chair scraping harshly against the flagstone patio. The music faltered. The cellist dragged her bow with a discordant groan before falling silent. All heads, which had been turned toward me, now swiveled to the front row. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, was standing. She smoothed her impeccable, dove-gray Valentino sheath dress, a gesture so casual it was utterly terrifying. She held a champagne flute. Why did she have champagne already? And she tapped her manicured fingernail against the crystal. Tink, tink, tink. The sound was tiny, monstrous, and it commanded the entire universe to stop. She cleared her throat, a dry, polite sound. She smiled, a thin, bloodless line. "I'm so sorry to interrupt this lovely spectacle," she began, her voice carrying the clipped, aristocratic tone she reserved for waitstaff and, apparently, her only son's wedding. "But I'm afraid I cannot, in good conscience, allow this to continue." My father's grip on my arm became vice-like. I could feel the tremor in his hand. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was a statue in a wedding gown, my bouquet of peonies and roses suddenly feeling like a lead weight in my hands. Liam's face had drained of all color. "Mother," he whispered, a desperate, choked sound. "Sit down." She ignored him completely. Her eyes, the same cool blue as Liam's, but without a trace of their warmth, scanned the horrified, frozen audience before landing squarely on me. There was no anger in her gaze, only a chilling, surgical certainty. "This marriage," she said, her voice dropping into that dead silence, making every syllable ring out like a verdict, "is a mistake." The air left my lungs in a painful rush. A mistake. The word echoed in the new, terrible silence. My dream, my future, my love, distilled into a single, venomous word: mistake. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. I heard a distant gasp from my great-aunt. 100 people were holding their breath. The world had not just stopped, it had shattered. And we were all standing on the pieces. Liam found his voice first. It was raw with a fury I had never heard from him. "Mother, what the hell are you doing?"
"Seek down. Now."
He took a step toward her, but our best man, Mark, grabbed his arm, holding him back from what, I don't know, physically escorting his own mother from his wedding. Eleanor didn't even flinch. She took a small sip of her champagne, as if toasting her own audacity. "I have remained silent long enough," she continued, as if she were addressing a board meeting. "I have watched this relationship unfold, and I have held my tongue. But to stand by and watch my son make a catastrophic error that will ruin his life? I am his mother. I cannot do it."
My knees felt weak.
The anchor of my father's arm was the only thing keeping me upright. My vision began to tunnel, the faces of our friends and family blurring into a smear of confusion and pity. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. Any second, I would wake up in my girlhood bedroom, my wedding dress hanging pristine on the closet door, the day still full of promise. But the cold evening air on my skin was real. The weight of my dress was real. The look of utter devastation on Liam's face was devastatingly real. Eleanor opened her mouth to speak again, to pour more poison into the well, but she was finally interrupted. Not by Liam, not by my father, by my grandmother. Nana Rose, 82 years old, 4'11" in her heels, slowly rose from her seat in the second row. She didn't scrape her chair. She simply stood, a vision in lavender silk, her back ramrod straight. She turned to face Eleanor, and her voice, though aged, was clear and carried the quiet authority of a woman who had survived a world war and raised 5 children. Eleanor, Nana said, her tone dangerously calm. You will stop speaking now. You will sit down, or you will be removed. This is not your moment. It is theirs. The spell of horror broke. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My uncle, a large man who'd played college football, took a firm step toward the patio. The threat was implicit. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. A flicker of surprise, then outrage, crossed her face. She looked at Nana Rose as if she were a bug that had dared to speak. She opened her mouth, closed it, and with a final, scathing glance at me, she sat down. She placed her champagne flute neatly on the flagstones beside her chair and folded her hands in her lap, as if she had simply decided the entertainment was over. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was fractured, electric with shock and buzzing with unspoken questions. Liam was at my side in an instant. He had broken away from Mark and rushed down the aisle, his eyes wild with panic and apology. Sophia. My God, Sophia. I am so sorry. I can't. He was crying. My strong, steady Liam was crying. I looked from his anguished face to the seated figure of his mother, who was now examining her perfect manicure, to the 100 guests who were witnessing the total demolition of our wedding day. What do you do when your dream is publicly executed at the altar? Some part of me, some deep, primal core that I didn't know existed, took over. The part that had fought her way through law school, the part that had argued cases in front of intimidating judges. The part that was a fighter. I looked at the string quartet, who were staring at their instruments as if they might spontaneously combust. I caught the cellist's sigh. I nodded. I turned to my father, whose face was ashen with rage. Daddy, I whispered, my voice surprisingly steady. Let's go. I looked at Liam and I took his hand. It was ice cold. We are getting married, I said, my voice low but clear. The cellist, after a moment of stunned hesitation, lifted her bow. The violins and viola followed shakily. The processional resumed, a little unsteady, a little heartbroken, but it played. My father, with tears now streaming openly down his face, led me the remaining 10 steps to the flower-covered archway where the pale-faced officiant stood. Liam walked beside me, holding my hand in a death grip. We took our places. The minister, a kindly woman named Margaret, looked utterly terrified. She leaned in and whispered, My dear children, we can stop. We can reconvene. No, Liam and I said in unison. Continue, I said, and she did. Her voice trembled as she began the ceremony. We said our vows. My voice did not shake. I looked into Liam's eyes, and I saw nothing but love, humiliation, and a desperate, pleading love. We exchanged rings. We were pronounced husband and wife. We kissed. It was not the kiss I had imagined. It was not soft, or sweet, or joyful. It was a desperate, clinging kiss. A kiss of survival. A kiss that said, the world is trying to break us, but we are still here. The crowd erupted into applause, but it was not the cheerful, celebratory roar it should have been. It was a storm of emotion, relief, support, outrage, and overwhelming awkwardness. It was the sound of people clapping because they didn't know what else to do. We turned to face our guests. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt like a grotesque mask. And my eyes immediately found Eleanor. She was not clapping. She was not smiling. She was watching us with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. Then, she stood up, gathered her purse, and without a glance at anyone, walked calmly out of the garden, through the house, and out of our lives. The reception was awake.
People tried. God, did they try?
They drank the champagne, they ate the salmon and filet mignon, they gave toasts that were painfully carefully worded, avoiding any mention of the elephant that had not just been in the room but had trampled it. My father's toast was a tearful, furious speech about resilience and love. Liam's best man, Mark, made a clumsy joke that fell utterly flat. We had our first dance to Etta James's at last. We held each other, swaying, but we were miles apart, lost in our own private hells of humiliation and anger. I didn't know, Liam whispered into my hair as we danced. Sophia, I swear to you, I had no idea she would ever. I know, I said.
And I did know.
This was not Liam's fault, but it was his mother. And she was now my family too. The story of that wedding day became legend, of course. The gossip spread like wildfire, twisted and turned into a dozen different versions. But the core truth remained. Eleanor Winslow had stood up and tried to stop her son's wedding, and we had married anyway. For the first year of our marriage, Eleanor was a ghost at our feast. She sent back our wedding announcement photo, ripped neatly in half, with me discarded. She never called. She never answered Liam's calls. She erased him, and by extension me, from her life. We tried to live normally. We built a life in our small apartment. I worked my way up at the law firm. Liam excelled at his architecture firm. We were happy in a way. We had a strong, fierce love that had been forged in a public fire. But the shadow of that day was always there. It was in the way I flinched when a chair scraped on a restaurant floor. It was in the way Liam's face would darken whenever Mother's Day ads came on TV. We were united in our pain, but it was still our pain. The question hung over us, unasked and unanswered. Why? Why had she done it? She had never liked me, that was clear. I was not from their world of old money and private clubs. My father was a teacher, my mother a librarian. We were comfortable, but we were new money to her, which was almost worse than no money at all. I was too opinionated, too career-driven, not the placid, socialite wife she had envisioned for her son. But to go to such nuclear lengths? It seemed disproportionate, even for her. The answer came on a rainy Sunday afternoon a year and a half later. Liam was at the office working on a deadline. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there she was. Eleanor. She looked older, thinner. The impeccable armor of her appearance was slightly dented. Her hair had more gray. She wore a simple trench coat, beaded with rain, and she held a small, leather-bound book in her hands. Sophia, she said. My name sounded strange in her mouth.
I didn't say anything.
I just stood there, blocking the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. May I come in? She asked. There was no demand in her voice. It was tired. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I stepped aside. She walked into our living room, her eyes taking in the bookshelves, the art we'd chosen together, the photos of us happy and smiling. She didn't sit. Liam isn't here, I said, my voice cold. I know, she said. I came to see you. She turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw not a monster, but a deeply, tragically unhappy woman. I suppose I owe you an explanation, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not that it will excuse what I did. Nothing can. She held out the leather-bound book. It was a journal. My husband, Liam's father, and I had a marriage of convenience. Our families arranged it. I was young, foolish, and I believed I loved him. He was handsome, charming, and a complete philanderer. I took the book, my fingers numb. He had an affair, she continued, her eyes looking at a point somewhere past my shoulder. A serious one. It lasted for years. I found out about it the night before our wedding. My own mother knew. Everyone knew, it seemed, but me. She pulled me aside, just before the rehearsal dinner, and told me. She said it was my duty to go through with the marriage. That the scandal would be too great. That I would learn to live with it. A cold dread began to creep into my stomach. I went through with it, she said, a bitter smile twisting her lips. I learned to live with it. I lived with his indifference, his infidelity, his contempt for 40 years until he had the decency to die of a heart attack. I channeled all my love, all my passion, into my son. He was my entire world. I was determined to protect him from making the same mistake I had, from a life of quiet misery. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a desperate, painful light. The week before your wedding, an old acquaintance of mine saw Liam having lunch with a young woman. A very beautiful, very attentive young woman. They were at a quiet, intimate table. He said they were laughing, leaning close. He took a photograph. She pointed a trembling finger at the journal in my hands. It's in there. With numb fingers, I opened the journal. A printed, slightly grainy photograph fell into my hand. It was Liam. He was indeed at a cozy restaurant booth with a stunning brunette. They were both leaning over the table, smiling. It did look intimate. It did look damning. But I knew that woman. It was Isabella, his client's wife. The client was an 80-year-old art collector who'd sent his young wife to liaise with the architect designing his new gallery. Liam had told me about that lunch. He'd complained about it, about how the woman had been flirty and inappropriate, and how he'd cut the meeting short. I looked from the photo to Eleanor's tortured face. You thought he was having an affair, I said, the pieces crashing together. You thought he was making the same mistake as his father. I knew it, she said, her voice cracking. I saw the photograph and I knew it. I saw your face, so happy, so oblivious, just as I had been. And I snapped. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let you go through what I went through. And I couldn't let him ruin his life. In my twisted, broken mind, I was saving you. Both of you. I thought if I stopped the wedding, I could force him to see the truth. The room was spinning. The monstrous act, the cruelty that had haunted our lives for over a year, was born from this? From her own trauma? From a warped, desperate attempt at protection? You are wrong, I said, my voice hollow. There was no affair. She was a client. He told me about her that very night. Eleanor's face collapsed. All the certainty, all the icy resolve, drained away, leaving behind a raw, broken woman. She swayed on her feet. He told you? Yes. A small, broken sound escaped her lips. It was the sound of a lifetime of defensive walls crumbling into dust. She had built her entire identity on being right, on being the shrewd protector. And she had been catastrophically, devastatingly wrong. I destroyed everything, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I thought I was saving him, and I've lost him forever. She turned and walked out of my house, leaving the journal and the photograph on the coffee table. She didn't look back. I stood there for a long time listening to the rain. The anger I had clung to for so long didn't vanish, but it changed. It was no longer a sharp, burning coal in my heart. It became a heavy, sorrowful weight. I wasn't just angry for Liam, for our wedding. I was angry for her, for the young woman she had been, betrayed on the eve of her own wedding, forced into a life of loneliness. Her weapon had been cruelty, but its source was a pain so deep it had festered for decades. When Liam came home, I showed him the journal. I told him everything. He read the entries his mother had written about his father. He saw the photograph. He sat on the floor, his back against the couch, and he cried for the mother he thought he had, for the father he'd never really known, and for the pain that had twisted them all. Reconciliation was not instant. It was a slow, painful process of months. Liam began to talk to her again, first on the phone, then in person. I did not join them. The wound was too deep for me. But I didn't stand in his way. I learned a powerful lesson from the silence that followed my mother-in-law's declaration. It taught me that some sounds are so terrible they can break a world. But I also learned that after the silence comes a choice. You can let the broken pieces lie there, sharp and painful, or you can begin, slowly and carefully, to gather them up. You can't always put them back together the way they were. The cracks will always show. Our marriage, mine and Liam's, will always have a hairline fracture running through its foundation, a memory of the day it almost ended before it began. But sometimes, the things that break us are the very things that teach us how to be strong. And sometimes, the most powerful declarations are not the ones made in front of a crowd, but the quiet ones we make to ourselves every day after. The choice to love, to trust, and to build something new from the pieces.